Hello and welcome to our very special show, US Election Watch. I'm Gauri Dwivedi, and the next 30 minutes is going to be all about the most comprehensive coverage of the election that matters to the world. So we're going to get you all the insights, the perspective, and the latest that's happening in the race to Oval Office, but never losing sight of the India story. Why the US election matters to India. Why is it that this is the most important election that could change the way the world will think, change the way Asia could think, and of course also have an impact on the US-India relations? And we start this show on a day when the Democrat National Convention is all set to kickstart and will officially nominate Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee, taking on Donald Trump in an election that is likely to go down to the wire. So let's get started. Let's get in some of those numbers on your screen, those graphics that tell you exactly how this election is really now tied to the wire. So but first of all, what all do we expect from the Democrat National Convention? It's a 4-day event. There's going to be lots of speeches. All the big and the who's who of the Democrat Party will be there, former presidents no less, and all in the end culminating into Kamala Harris becoming the official presidential nominee, taking on Donald Trump. As I said, this is an election that could go down to the wire, but we are going to tell you, the viewers, what is it that Team Kamala is going to present as options. We are going to tell you what is it that Team Trump is also going to talk about. What is the election all about? What are the issues on which America is going to vote? And whoever comes to power, what is it that they will bring on the table, and why is it that India will be impacted? That's really all that we're going to pack in the next 30 minutes. But first up, let's get in our Voice of America reporter, Catherine Gibson, to give us the very latest of what's happening right now on ground zero at the Democrat National Convention. Catherine, you are there. Talk to us about what all is likely in the next 4 days. There's lots of big speeches, all former presidents set to be there. President Biden is going to be there, culminating into Kamala Harris becoming the official nominee. But take us through the highlights that we can expect.
Right. So it's going to be an impressive lineup of speakers. As you mentioned, the first night tonight is going to kick off with the President of the United States in what will be one of the biggest speeches of his career. It certainly won't be his final speech as president, but it will be a chance for him to reflect on his political legacy and his decision to step aside for Vice President Kamala Harris to run for the Democratic nomination and go up against former President Trump in the November election. He's going to look back at his record of public service. He'll be introduced by the First Lady, Jill Biden, his wife. We'll also hear from former Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton, also the Secretary of State. She is, of course, the first major party nominee as a woman for the presidency, lost to Donald Trump in 2016. So a lot of memories here in Chicago of the last time a woman accepted the nomination, and the feeling that this time is definitely going to be different this time around.
Absolutely. It's going to be different. And, look how quickly the mood in the Democrat camp has really changed. About a month back, they were talking about, an 81-year-old Biden who's probably, more of a political inconvenience. Now he is, of course, now the big statesman making way for Kamala Harris, who's breaking all, glass ceilings, so to say. So talk to us about what's really the mood right now in the Democrat camp. Of course, there is going to be all these bellwether speakers who'd be there. But talk to us about, you've been speaking to a lot of people there. 50,000 and plus is the kind of crowd. Tell us more.
Sure. Well, it's absolutely extraordinary to think that only 4 weeks ago yesterday, President Biden announced that he was stepping aside for Kamala Harris, completely changing the course of this race. We know that when Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, the polls in a lot of key swing states across the United States started to shift in the Democrats' favor. There was a huge sense of energy, a new direction to this race, a new generation running for the White House, and that really changed the race. It also frustrated former President Trump, who had a whole playbook planning to run against Joe Biden to accuse him of being old, feeble-minded, and now he's really having to recalibrate. He's having to look at the policies of Kamala Harris and fight them on that point. So The Democrats here are going to be talking about their platform of opportunity for the American people. They're going to be saying that we cannot go back to the time of the Trump presidency in terms of women's reproductive rights, in terms of defending democracy, and we need to move forward.
Catherine, before I let you go, I want to ask you about the protests. The world over, there's talk about and chatter that, those protesters outside could actually derail the Kamala campaign as well, because, it may just come down to some of those very, anti-America slogans, so to say, or at least that's what Team Trump would be hoping for.
Right. So obviously we're just getting started here in Chicago, so we haven't seen a lot of protests so far. We saw some protesters break into a welcome party late last night in Chicago. But to put it into context, Chicago is a huge city. There are multiple venues for the convention. There's a lot of security. I can speak to that myself, having to go through multiple security perimeters just to reach the spots where these events are being held. We're going to see the protesters separated from where the main event is happening. So far, no big trouble.
All right, Catherine Gibson joining us live from Chicago, where the Democrat National Convention is just getting started. Catherine, I'm going to keep coming back to you in the next couple of days to get us more. Thanks so much. And as things stand right now, it looks like that Team Kamala has definitely inching ahead of Donald Trump right now. Take a look at this package that tells you really as to how it may go down to the wire, but right now as things stand, there is a bit of a slim lead that Kamala Harris has over Donald Trump.
We trust women to know what is in their own best interest.
Kamala Harris is surging. Ever since US President Joe Biden stepped out of the race to the White House, there has been a reversal in fortune for the Democratic Party. On Sunday, a new ABC News Washington Post Ipsos national poll put Harris ahead by 6 points among likely voters, while a CBS News YouGov poll gave Harris a 3-point lead nationally. To add to that, Harris is ahead of Trump by 49 to 45% among registered voters in a two-way race, according to the ABC News poll. Even conservative polling company Rasmussen Reports shows Vice President Kamala Harris leading former President Donald Trump in Michigan. Harris leads Trump in many national and some swing state polling where Biden was lagging behind. This has Kamala entering the Democratic National Convention not just with momentum but with a slight advantage over Trump. Despite the Kamala surge, the race is far from over. Polling shows that the race remains winnable for either candidate. 8 years ago, Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote. Whatever the final result, Harris has shown how a struggling campaign can be bolstered. Vishal Vivek for NDTV World.
As things stand, 6 points is a huge lead that Kamala Harris has over Donald Trump. She needs to keep this momentum going. Remains to be seen how the next 2 months, or 80 days in fact, would pan out for her. But take a look at this detailed report that tells you exactly what all can we expect as far as the Democrat National Convention is concerned. Take a look.
Democrats are kicking off their convention in Chicago to formally nominate Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to top their 2024 presidential ticket. Now, the gathering marks an opportunity for Democrats to ride the good vibes around Kamala Harris, who last month was elevated as the party's de facto nominee after Joe Biden actually ended his own bid. We are told that the convention is anticipated to be heavy on messages of freedom, as Kamala Harris and Tim Walz run against former President Donald Trump and his Senator J.D. Vance. But here are the 5 things you need to watch out for at this year's DNC. Now, Kamala Harris has been enjoying a nearly month-long honeymoon since Biden dropped out, riding a wave of flattering social media praise. That boost is likely to continue this week, and for a short time afterwards, many argue, enjoying a traditional post-convention bump. But speculation abounds about how big of a festival this will be, with whispers of whether big-name performers such as Taylor Swift and Beyoncé will make an appearance. But after the convention, however, the question will be how long the good times can roll. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will face off at their first debate on the 10th of September, and a good performance there could actually extend Kamala Harris's honeymoon. Harris has framed her campaign, meanwhile, around a message of freedom, even down to highlighting Beyoncé's hit song of the same name. But analysts highlight that the strategy is more forward-thinking rather than Biden's rallying cry, which actually goes back to the January 6, 2021 insurrection, an event that Democrats still mention but appear to resonate less with voters agitating for a more long-term vision. The third thing, Joe Biden will deliver a speech. It's going to be a huge reception as per political watchers, we're told. Fourthly, while Biden's debate and age were the chief factors in ending his political career, he was also criticized from the left over his handling of the war in Gaza. And those detractors are not going away just because he's no longer a Democratic nominee. Protests over the rising death toll in Gaza will be held blocks away from the Chicago's United Center, and delegates who were sent to the convention by uncommitted votes in various states have full access to the event floor with nothing to stop them from interrupting the proceedings. As we speak at the moment, it's unclear precisely how much the convention will deal with the war and if there will be any interruptions at all. Lastly, as you're well aware, conventions for both parties are primarily occasions to highlight leaders, chiefly the presidential nominees. But they also serve as opportunities to elevate rising stars. Democrats have not said who this year's keynote speaker will be, but their pick could indicate who they view as a future party leader and in what ideological direction the Democratic Party in the US is heading.
Okay, those were really the key issues on which US elections are likely to take place. If one were to say in 3 words, well, it could be abortion, immigration and taxes or economy. That's essentially what the US election could be all about. But today, it is about the Democrat National Convention and which will officially put Kamala Harris as the nominee taking on Donald Trump. And to discuss that, I have Ajay Bhutoria, who's a Democrat delegate, joining me on the broadcast. Also, MR Rangaswami of Indiaspora Forum. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for speaking to me on NDTV World. My first question to you, both of you, is that as things stand, well, some would say that this is a great honeymoon phase for Kamala Harris that is just going, but the recent and the latest numbers seem to suggest that she's managed to get a decent lead over Donald Trump. How do you see that, Mr. Bhutoria? First you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very exciting moment, and this is going to be a historic convention where we are going to nominate the first Indian American, the first Asian American, the first Black woman to be the nominee for the Democratic Party and to be elected as the president in next coming weeks. I mean, so this is going to be a historic 4 days, and today we will be President Biden will be speaking on the theme for the people, where he will be highlighting his achievements and records, where he picked up the country from Trump during the COVID time and at the highest unemployment, and how he has transformed. So the party will be paying tribute to the transformative presidency of Joe Biden and how he has paved the way for Kamala Harris to be the next president.
Right. MR Rangaswamy, what do you think or what do you expect to be the kind of messaging that will come in over the next 4 days at the convention?
Yeah, I think really our community is excited, but I think the messaging that we expect to come out is going to be about the economy. It's going to be a key part of the campaign. And then also the other problems, like Ajay mentioned, whether it's taxes, whether it's abortion rights, and so on and so forth. But I think we look for a strong economic message that can help America go stronger, and especially the middle class of America go stronger.
Indeed. And in the next 4 days, essentially everyone who matters in the Democrat Party would be rallying strongly behind Kamala Harris, starting with President Biden, then of course former presidents as well. There'll be President Obama and Hillary Clinton and so on and so forth. How do you see this in terms of a show of strength, in terms of their messaging and the campaign of the Democrat Party from here on? MR Rangaswamy.
Yeah, I think you noticed that this time around, everybody coalesced around Vice President Harris. It was quick and remarkable with a lot of enthusiasm. The entire party and the entire community has rallied around Kamala Harris for president. So you've seen that kind of unification play out throughout the next 4 days. You'll see different presidents and vice presidents and other speakers rally around the message, rally around Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So I think you'll see a tremendous message of unity and a tremendous message to really elect, like Ajay said, the first Indian American president, the first Black president of the United States, and also, let's not forget, the first woman in the United States.
Absolutely. Ajay, you want to come in there, sir? In terms of the show of strength,
Yeah,
the big
absolutely. I mean, this
names
is
that will be coming in, and anything specific that you expect from their speeches from these big leaders?
Yeah, as I said, tonight is the night with the President Biden, and tomorrow, President Obama will be talking about a bold vision for America's future. When he was running for president, he talked about hope. But tomorrow he'll be talking about what is the vision for America's future with Kamala Harris as the leader for the Democratic Party. And the next 4 years, next year, 8 years will be Kamala Harris as the leader of the party. So we will be hearing from President Obama. And then on Wednesday, we'll be hearing from President Clinton and Governor Walz, who will be the next vice president, about our fight for freedom. Because as Kamala Harris said, this election is about the freedom for women's rights, for abortion, freedom for people of all color and all races living in peace without hate and divisiveness, freedom from economic crisis, and also immigration issues being resolved at the border, and also bringing an end to two wars, Gaza and Ukraine, which are going on, and not having more wars. I mean, so that's what Kamala Harris will be talking about for our future on Thursday, and the whole party is now behind Kamala Harris and Governor Walz. And as you said, there'll be whoever is everybody from the party leaders will be here, and almost 50,000 people are expected. I was at the convention center yesterday for doing the podium preview, and this looks amazing. I mean, when the energy is going to be so high and enthusiasm, this will definitely push Kamala Harris over few points more over Trump. Already she's leading by 5 to 4 points nationally, and this convention is going to push her, spike her up much higher after the convention.
Right. And MR Rangaswami, let me ask you this. The Trump campaign is then specifically now targeting Vice President Harris, saying that, she doesn't need to wait till she comes as the president. She's been there for the last 3.5 years as vice president. Why didn't she work on some of the issues that she's now raising, whether it's inflation, whether it's the tax breaks or breaks for people for home ownership and so on and so forth? Do you think this is likely really to be the dominating aspect of the campaign from here on?
Well, it all depends. Trump's campaign is very unpredictable, so we don't know what issues he can focus on, or is it going to be more of personal attacks on Kamala Harris? So I think, leaving that aside, I think the message from Kamala Harris and the entire Democratic Party has to be one of unity, one of integrity, and one which looks out for the middle class and supports and protects women's rights and immigration rights and for immigrants. So I think that message will resonate well over any of the attacks that Trump can put out at this point.
Ajay, I want to ask you about the kind of reception that you expect for President Biden's speech, and what do you expect him to sort of lay out in his messaging? I ask you this because President Biden has made a transition from being, an 81-year-old, almost a political inconvenience, to being the biggest statesman of the Democrat Party, who's thinking of the party before himself. That's the transition in his personality and persona that has happened in the last 1 month. What do you expect in his speech, in his messaging, that could be the first thing to really look out for in the convention?
I think for many, many thousands of attendees today, well, like me, it will be a very emotional moment, because we have very deep and personal connection with President Biden, and he has been there for over many years. I've worked with him while he was vice president for 2 terms, and then for this term as a president. So President Biden will talk about how he inherited the country, which was reeling under pandemic-plagued nation, and 3.5 years ago, and then the progress he made charting the U.S. out of a confluence of crises. We had the economic crisis, the health crisis. We had to restore our relationship abroad, which were damaged by Trump, and he had to rebuild the NATO, and then he had to deal with coming out of Afghanistan and handling the war in Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza crisis, and at the home, curbing unauthorized border crossing, which are now being under control, and crime at home. So, and then bringing sweeping economic changes, which has the lowest unemployment rate of any time under President Biden presidency, he controlled the inflation to a large extent. So these are things, accomplishments he will talk about, and then he will talk about how he paved and passed the torch to the next generation leaders like Kamala Harris. So that's a great thing to hear about him, and I think there'll be a rousing reception, there'll be a warm welcome, and a lot of standing ovations, and people will go, a lot of emotional moments to say goodbye to him, even though this is not a formal goodbye. He has 5 more months, and probably in January we will hear more from him in his final speech about how he's leaving his legacy behind the country. But this will be one of the biggest audience he'll be speaking to today.
Okay. MR Rangaswamy, I want to ask you about the protests. It's still early right now. People are still gathering in, so probably the protesters will also take some time before they come in. But how much do you think would be the airtime that would be given to those protesters? How significant do you expect them and their protests to be in terms of dominating headlines over the next couple of days? And do you see that having an impact on the campaign going forward? Because, that's what Team Trump is hoping, that some of these protesters actually derail the messaging that Harris wants it to be, which is about freedom and which is about forward looking.
Yeah, I don't think, the beauty of America is you can protest, but you have to protest peacefully. And I think the Chicago police and other authorities will ensure that is possible and is doable. So I don't think this is going to be like back in 1968 when the Democratic Convention was held. There were a lot of protests which led to the Democratic candidate losing, as you know. But I think this time there's high energy, enthusiasm for the candidate. No, I don't expect protests to be divisive or disruptive, and I don't think that's going to be the main topic of conversation.
All right, MR Rangaswamy, Ajay Bhutoria, thanks so much for speaking to me on day one of this US Election Watch special show. But I'm going to keep coming back to you, gentlemen, through the course of this unprecedented election, which is likely to go down to the wire, and of course the Democrat National Convention as well. Thanks so much for speaking to me today.